right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Cheska Cordero from Insightful Accountant and your host for today. Before we actually start, and everybody's kind of coming in, the drill, we want to ask our question of the day just as everyone's kind of coming in, settling down in front of their computers, their phones, their tablets. Okay, so Christine, Valentine's Day yesterday.
hmm
And I want to know, like, what you think is a staple for people to do in February. Because, like, I know me and my fiance did not spend Valentine's Day together. We're spending it on Saturday because, like, we're working. We can't. We, like,
Yeah,
physically can't. So, what do you think is a staple for people to do?
I'm like such a terrible person to ask because I am just like not a Valentine's Day fanatic. Like
Got it.
it's in the middle of tax season and I just kind of don't like my husband's great about it. He gets flowers and cards and the whole nine yards, but I kind of just like blow it off. But a staple, I mean, a lot of people will go to dinner and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Nothing too out of the ordinary. I'll tell you what we did as our fun thing. Also, not yesterday because we were working, but earlier this week, we went and we got his and hers vitamin IV drips, which is a good time of year for it because everybody's sick. So there you go. There's our out of the box Valentine's
No, hey,
Day thing.
priorities.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I don't know. I'm a terrible Valentine's Day person.
No,
That's
I
the
wouldn't say that. Like, we didn't even spend Valentine's Day together yet.
Yeah. So
Like,
I'm good with like candy. I like candy.
same. And the funny thing about that is, for me personally, like Valentine's Day and our anniversary are just right next to each other. So
Yeah.
we're like, okay, do we want to spend it on Valentine's Day or do we want to do it on our anniversary? Or if we
Yeah,
both have to work, I'm sorry, it's the weekend for you for both.
I get it. Totally get it. Yeah, my husband's birthday is next week, so we tend to like skip over
Yep,
Valentine's Day and just focus on yeah,
I
I
get
get
it.
that.
It's not, probably my bad too for saying yes. Um, really close to Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
probably my
Well,
bad. Did not think about that.
yeah, so it's okay.
Yeah,
We won't spend too much time on Valentine's Day. That's
yeah.
all it is.
Yep, true. Okay. All right, since we're not spending time on it, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Jessica Cordero from Insightful Accountant and your host for today. Now, in this tax talk, we'll actually be going over planned giving and other estate strategies with the amazing Christine Gervais. Now, we'll have her introduce herself in just a little bit after I cover a few of the housekeeping items. Now, there is no CPE for this as it is just a 30-minute webinar. And if you have any questions, you guys, you know the drill, put them in the Q&A panel and be specific. Don't just say, hey, Christine, what you mean? You got to ask, hey, Christine, what do you mean by you guys don't spend Valentine's Day too much? Mainly because she might not get to your question right after you put it in there. Now, we will be sending you a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording after the webinar. And it's also going to be up on our YouTube page within about 24 hours. So if you want to go check that out over there, along with many other webinars that Christine's also done in the past that might be of interest to you. Now, I'll also be putting that link to our YouTube channel in the chat. Now, also do not forget that we have many webinars for you this month, whether you're interested in practice management, marketing, tax, or all things QuickBooks, Insightful Accountant's got something for you. Now, you can check out all of our webinars too that are available to you over on our educational webinars page on our site. And I'll also be putting that link into our chat as well. And I will be rolling out all those links and the copy of the slide deck throughout the webinar in case you might have missed it. So watch out for that in the chat. All right. Actually, Christine, that's it for me. Welcome and thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, as always. Okay, so now, always the hardest part of the whole presentation, the technology, getting the screen shared, and then getting the slides up. Awesome. Okay, so just give me one more second here. We're going to see if we can get the chat box and Q&A box open. I will keep an eye on these over here in case you have any questions, concerns while we are going through. Thank you all for being here. If we have not met before, my name is Christine Gervais. I've had my CPA license for about 15 years. And one of my favorite things about today is that I am actually not an estate expert. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means and why we're still going to have a conversation about it today. If you are not already subscribed to Tax Practice News and you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any of the great things that Cheska just mentioned, you can go ahead and scan that QR code and it will take you right to the page to go ahead and make sure that you're subscribed and you never miss out on any sort of future events. So diving right in, I mentioned I am not an estate planning expert. So why am I here talking to you about this today? And I think the thing to really think about as we go through today. And one of the reasons why I chose this topic is because a lot of your tax clients will eventually have some type of estate planning need, succession planning need. They might have a charitable giving need in terms of a tax planning strategy. And so, even if you're not going to put yourself out there as an estate planning tax expert or those types of things, it's important to have a general understanding of what's available to your clients, what you need to be listening for in conversation. And we want to make sure that we're just giving you the right tools so that you can really enhance that value add through conversations with your clients. So even if you ultimately are like, I don't want to do estate tax returns. I don't want to do estate tax planning. I don't feel confident with it. I don't want to take the time to learn it. That's okay. But a lot of what we're going to talk about today will help to set you up well in a conversation with a client so that if something does come up, you can know what questions to ask and you can know ahead of time what direction you need to point that client in. And so other things we'll talk about adding value through partnerships. What type of partnerships do you need to have if you're not necessarily going to build a robust estate and giving, planned giving practice in-house? Who do you need to have in your bank of connections to get your clients to, and how can you take advantage of maybe revenue streams through those partnerships? um, what tax savings opportunities are available to your clients so that if they are asking you, how do I save more in taxes, that you have this in your tool belt to maybe potentially offer to clients that this is the right fit for. And if you do think that this is a revenue stream that you potentially want to add, knowing what you need to pursue in terms of more information or an expert on your team, kind of giving you that high level overview of, hey, what's out there? How do we potentially add this to our practice as an additional service? I know a lot of practitioners will say that they don't necessarily specialize in estates and trusts and things like that. They are very, very specific and very, very different than your standard business and individual income tax returns. But again, like I said, I think that there's a lot of value that we can add to our clients, and just having those conversations and connecting them to the right individual to help them if we're not going to be the ones that are going to get them through the details and the nitty gritty of these planning strategies. So that's what I mean when I say that I'm not an expert, but I have made it a point to make sure that I know enough that I can guide my clients through this process. And that's what I want you to be able to get out of today as well. So things to keep in mind when it comes to estate planning, not every client is necessarily going to need a large, robust estate plan. So estate exemptions are still above $13 million. Of course, this is always something that's highly political. And, as our Congress and Senate change, could this potentially change? Yes. It's been on the chopping block a couple of times to bring this exemption back down. But as it stands right now for 2024, estate exemption over 13 million. So what that essentially means is that absent someone's estate exceeding that amount, the estate itself is probably not likely going to be subject to estate taxes. That doesn't mean that there's not other tax implications that are potentially coming out of that state, meaning that if someone passes away and their total estate isn't over 13 million, it doesn't mean that your clients, beneficiaries of inherited properties and things like that aren't going to potentially have some tax implications that they need to think about. And so again, this is where you just kind of want to have some basis in, hey, what's out there? How do some of these things work? Because I want to be able to, at the very least, point my clients in the best direction. Now, there's also lifetime gift exemptions, and we're going to talk about gifting and charitable giving and things like that to help from an estate planning and, planned giving process to help reduce income taxes. But it's important to note that if your clients are giving gifts, that is eating away at their estate exemption. So again, really no serious concerns if we're not talking about clients with very large estates, but you just want to keep those things in mind. And gifting can be a way that your clients can plan over a period of time to kind of transition some of those assets to the next generation if that's a good tax planning strategy for them. There are also still step up in basis rules that apply to certain property. It doesn't generally apply to things like IRAs and 401ks, but if you have clients that have significantly appreciated real estate property and you're having some type of future succession planning conversation with them, who are going to be the beneficiaries of this property in the future, you want to keep that step up in basis rule kind of in mind. And the reason I mention that is because it's important from a future tax planning strategy, like purpose perspective, to know that that step up in basis is potentially available, but it only is available after the actual date of death. And so it's not as available if we're talking about transitioning property prior to death. So those are really specific things that you're going to have to just kind of keep in mind, like I said, as you're starting to have conversations with clients about these future tax planning strategies and what specifically is going to be a good fit for them. So, key considerations, and again, this is to kind of help you start to have in the back of your mind, what do I need to be listening for in a conversation with clients? So, what sort of areas of this conversation are going to be impacted from a tax perspective? Areas where you're going to potentially need to be bringing in a legal team or someone else that is going to advise your client. Like many of us are not selling life insurance policies, but that is inevitably going to be part of this conversation a lot of the times, and what questions you need to be asking your clients. So this is how this conversation has come up for me a lot in the past, even though I don't outwardly advertise and promote to our clients that we are these glorious expert estate planners. This is what happens. Client calls and says, my mom passed away. I inherited this piece of property. I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to keep it. I'm going to sell it. What are my tax implications? Or, um, my dad, I just had to move into a assisted living facility. He has X, Y, and Z for assets, and I don't know what I should or shouldn't be doing with those. What's going to be the tax impact to me if he passes away? Is there something that he's supposed to be doing with those right now? That's really how these conversations come up. So they're really most often not conversations that I'm having with someone that says, like, I have a $25 million estate and I need some estate tax planning. Of course, that comes up too. But you're going to have these questions come up with your clients that don't have a $13+ million estate. And they're going to be looking to you for the answers for these things. So questions that I always want to start kind of digging into with these clients when you have a succession planning or even just a life planning conversation with older clients or clients that are looking at their wills, their life insurance, what's going to happen in the future. Is there already a will in place? Is there any type of trust documents already in place? And this really, really important one, what are their primary goals? Every single client is going to be different in this regard, because you don't know if you're talking to the beneficiary, if you're talking to someone who's planning to be the future decedent and asking, how am I going to make sure that these things transition to my beneficiaries with the least tax impact? So no matter who you're talking to, you want to make sure that you have the goal in mind. Sometimes the primary goal is actually not tax reduction. It's that I want to make sure that my children are taken care of. I want to make sure that my business is going to continue. I want to make sure that X amount of the dollars that I have at date of death go to a specific charity. So it's really important to make sure that regardless of how this comes up and who you're talking to, you really understand what the personal goals are of that individual or that family in this particular case. Because again, even if you're not going to be the one that ultimately, does a full estate planning strategy for them, or even if you're not going to be the one that's going to prepare all of these returns, knowing what their primary goals are is going to help you to best guide them to who is the right partner for them. Do we need to start with a lawyer? Do we need to start with a life insurance agent? Do we need to start with X, fill in the blank. And so having that personal conversation of what would you like to see happen? Like, what's your ideal scenario? What are your primary concerns? And having this conversation will help give you better direction to be in that good advisory role and really, give them something valuable in return. So, planned giving strategies, these are things that you can be talking about with your clients. And again, you don't necessarily have to be the person that sets up the trust or administers the trust or prepares the trust tax return if that's not something that you want to bring into your practice. However, if it is something that you want to bring into your practice, a lot of these planned giving strategies require some type of trust setup, administration, potentially trust filing of tax returns, even while these individuals are still alive. And so, if you're going to have these conversations with your clients, it is potentially going to generate that next question, which is, can you file these tax returns for us? So, things to keep in mind. And I really think make sure that you decide where you want your practice to land on this spectrum before you start having these conversations. That's why I mentioned, potentially finding the right partners to help support you in this so that you have a good picture of the work that you are and are not willing to take on. But some different opportunities that you can talk to your clients about in terms of tax savings, especially if you have clients who are maybe older, who have some appreciated assets, and they don't necessarily know what they want to do with them. Maybe their children don't need all of them, and they would like to take advantage of some charitable giving with those assets, as well as some tax savings at the same time. So charitable remainder trusts, each one of these are a little bit different. I also just wrote a more detailed article on this past week, which you can find on the Tax Practice News website if you wanted to dive into any one of these in a little bit more specific detail. But charitable remainder trusts are a great fit where clients are still alive and they would like to continue to actually receive some form of income from their assets for a certain period of time, but they're also looking for some tax savings opportunities and they're willing to donate some of their assets to a charity upon their death. So essentially what you're doing in this case is you're placing assets into an irrevocable trust. So your clients often will receive a deduction at the time that that trust is created and the assets are donated to it because it's essentially treated as a charitable donation at that time. And then the trust can be set up in such a way where the client can remain a beneficiary and still receive some income from that trust during their lifetime. So that's a great option if you have a client kind of in that situation, to start saying, hey, a charitable remainder trust might be a good fit for you. It achieves your goals. Charitable lead trusts are a little bit different. They kind of work almost in the reverse, where the income is going to be paid out to the charity from the trust as opposed to your client. And then remaining assets are actually going to pass to the beneficiaries of the trust, which may or may not be the charity in this case. And so the deductibility and the timing for that charitable donation is a little bit different than the charitable remainder trust. And so again, just looking to understand your client's goals and what they're looking for, but they might be able to get a charitable donation deduction over a period of time for that trust paying out income to that charity. And then whatever's left over could potentially go to beneficiaries, children, grandchildren upon their death. So kind of a little bit in reverse of the first one, but still offers some tax savings, some charitable giving opportunities. And then charitable bequests, that's simply that you're going to denote that certain assets or amounts are going to be donated to charity out of the estate directly. And so that's something where you probably want to have your clients make sure that those are set up from more of a will perspective, less of a trust perspective. But again, some tax savings at the estate level if they have especially significantly appreciated assets that they don't necessarily want their children to have to address from a tax perspective in the future. And then something that we haven't talked about, where, a lot of this, I think, gets really focused on from the individual perspective. When we talk about estate planning, charitable giving, a lot of people immediately go to that individual perspective because, of course, with estate planning, we're talking about an individual passing away. But a lot of your clients are going to potentially have a small business that needs to be dealt with as well as part of this overall estate plan. And things to keep in mind with that is that what happens to a small business, especially if it's an S or a C corporation or a partnership, something other than a single member LLC, what happens with that business can be very convoluted and complicated after your individual client potentially passes away. And if they're looking to have that business continue in some way, if they're looking to have that business continue to provide income to their family after they're gone, that is really a whole other planning strategy that needs to be addressed outside of just their personal and individual assets. And so you might need to address key life insurance, owner's life insurance inside of a business with those individuals, which of course is going to impact them from a tax perspective because those are generally not tax deductible premiums to the business. And you want to be thinking about those things. But you also want to be able to have a conversation with your client of, okay, let us help you set this business up in a way that if something were to happen to you, what is your goal for the business? Do you want to see it continue to run? Do you need it to continue to provide income to your family? Is it just going to need enough life insurance paid out to the business to buy out your shares so that the other owners can continue? Are there other owners? Like, is there somebody else that's going to step in your place if you're gone tomorrow? All of these are succession planning questions that really need to be dug into. And again, just like the individuals, every small business owner is going to be different and have different goals. And so it's really important to have these conversations sooner rather than later. I think that this is a huge area where you can provide a tremendous amount of value to your small business owners, even if they're not bringing these immediately to your attention. Of course, none of us like to think about ourselves getting hit by that proverbial bus tomorrow, but you could have small business owners who haven't ever had this conversation, and you really want to make sure that their families are in a good position if something were to happen. And so these can be valuable conversations at any point in time. So things that you can kind of, again, just keep in your arsenal, your tool belt to potentially help these business owners is ESOPs, which are employee stock ownership plans. So that's a great succession planning for especially small, closely held businesses where you might have just a couple of family members or even a single owner to talk about how do we transition the ownership of this business over time, especially if you have some key employees that you would be looking to take over the business if something were to happen to the owner, and you want to empower them and make sure that you are keeping them in that organization. As well as there's some exemptions for small businesses who are filing as C corporations for a certain period of time. They potentially have future gain exclusions available to them if that business sells in the future. The organization has to be under a certain size, has to have filed for a C corp for a certain period of time. But C Corps aren't things that we often recommend to our small business owners. And if you do have a small business owner that is saying to you, I want to be able to sell my business in 5 to 10 years and walk away, now is the time to start having that tax planning conversation with them. And is this C corporation potentially a good fit for them because it's going to maybe save them significantly in capital gains later on when they are ready to sell this organization? And then again, you can have a charitable giving conversation from the business perspective as well. Does it make sense for any type of the business assets to be put into any of those trusts? All of those things are things that you can talk to your business owners about. It is going to be very dependent on their goals, their future plans, who might potentially take over, and what they want to see happen. But this is a conversation that is seldomly had with our small business clients. And you can really provide so much value because you're setting them up for success in a situation that they're not thinking about. They probably don't want to think about, honestly, but you don't want to see, family members, children, even employees of a business be put in a bad spot because we didn't have these conversations. And you can also potentially help save a lot of taxes too by having those conversations ahead of time and not waiting until you're stuck and kind of things have been sealed and now you can't go back and make some changes. So next steps for you to think about, connect with key partners such as attorneys and financial planners. I think you should do this regardless, even if you do want to offer estate tax filing, trust filing, even if you do want to offer some services in-house. I think that having a great team of people that you can rely on, an estate and trust attorney who does a really great job, financial planners who specialize in setting in charitable remainder trusts or who specialize in these types of areas, are great to have in your tool belt. The best estate planning conversations I have ever had have generally included at least us as well as the attorney and or ideally and the financial planner all on the same call, because you get all of these different perspectives. You have somebody coming in and saying, this is the tax impact of this plan. You have the attorney saying, this is what we can and can't do from a legal perspective. And you have the financial planner coming in and saying, within the parameters of what your CPA and your attorney are saying, these are the things that we can do, and this is the income that you can expect in the future. Building that team for your client is going to be putting you in a position of really solidifying that trusted advisor role with them. Consider clients that already have these needs. So your clients, I guarantee you have a client, at least one, in your list right now that has these needs. All of your small business owners have these needs. They're just not potentially talking to you about them. So this is a way for you to start asking some of those additional questions, potentially sell some additional services, at the very least, provide your clients with a lot of extra value. And they will for sure remember that. So ask your clients some of these questions, even maybe consider a light blog post that highlights some of these questions and tax savings ideas, just letting them know, hey, these are things that you maybe haven't thought about, and we're open to having a conversation with you about them. And then if you are considering meeting some of these needs in-house, highly recommend that you gain more knowledge. Again, the reason that I say I'm not an expert is because this is not an area that I specialize in. I have chosen to kind of go the key partner route and find people that we work with that once our clients get past a certain point in this conversation, I connect them to the team that I know that is going to serve them the best, because I am not trying to build an estate and trust practice in-house. But if you are, this is certainly an area that I would recommend that you get some more education on. The rules are, again, highly complex, not like individual and business tax returns, and you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with your knowledge on those year to year. So, lots of CPE to make sure that you've got the best knowledge base available to you, and you're providing the best service to your clients. So with that, we have about 60 seconds left. I will just pop it open for any questions. If there's anything that I can answer for you, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box. You guys are very quiet today, so either I answered all of your questions already or you're super bored on this topic. Jessica also put the link to the YouTube page, as well as a copy of the slide deck in the webinar chat. So if you wanted to grab either one of those, make sure that you go ahead and grab that information right now. And then here's my information. You can scan that QR code again, and it will take you to our website. My email address is up there. So if you have any questions that you didn't get a chance to get answered and you want to shoot those over to me or something more specific, feel free. And with that, I think that we're right at 12:30.
Right on
Perfect.
the dot.
Sometimes it works out like that.
Yeah, it's great. Life's great. All right. Well, actually, guys, right before we close this webinar out, remember that we have webinars, more webinars coming for you this month. Practice management, marketing, tax, QuickBooks, anything of those. Insightful Accountants got something for you. Or if you're looking for something a little more specific, you could also always check our YouTube page with it, which is in the chat. You guys could check that out over there, and also Christine's many other webinars that have happened over there. All right. Well, thanks so much, you guys. Have a good day. Have a good rest of the week. I know Friday's coming up. All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.